So first off, I'd like to introduce myself to you a little bit and really thank you for being here today. I know the situation is not ideal and it would have been amazing to meet all of you face to face, but we're making the best use of technology. We're pivoting and just using what we have available to us. So I really appreciate it. I'm actually from Guatemala, and like Lena said, I am a current student at UC Berkeley. I'm doing a product and project management certificate. In my career, I've actually worked for Disney, Capgemini, and Ricoh. It's some of the companies. My passion really is technology. So back in 2016, I started a digital marketing company back in Guatemala that was mostly data focused. Parting from that, after a few years, me and my co-founder decided to get back to the country, and we created a digital platform and a mentorship program that helped struggling entrepreneurs in Guatemala. Most of the population is called an entrepreneur because there is very little jobs. So we created this platform where people could go in and really learn and understand how to market their products. To date, more than 250 entrepreneurs have been helped and up to 20 indigenous communities. So we're pretty proud of what we've been able to do. I've also have experience working as a product and project manager at a US-based company out of Maryland called Intellimar. And what we do is basically use and leverage technology to create world-class processes and customer-focused products. So that's just a little bit about my background and why I can come and talk to you today, really. So the topic of today is creating a disruptive product. Can anybody give me an example of what you think or what concept you have about a disruptive product or what a disruptive product could be?
The Macintosh was a disruptive product.
It was, anyway.
It changed the rules for computing from a text-based interaction to a visual one.
Definitely a really, really good example. Anybody else?
I would say to add to that, an iPhone was a really disruptive product, right? It changed the whole way of how we called and how we did things, and people looked around at the cube and marveled at it. So I think it's really changed the landscape of how we communicate.
Completely. Another really, really good example. Anybody else?
I think, oh, sorry, I should have raised my hand. Products like Uber, Lyft, ride sharing, so allowing anybody to become a driver and have jobs, and as well as for anybody else, the riders, to be able to get a ride quickly and be more confident in who their driver is, and basically just changing what our parents taught us: don't ever get into cars with strangers. And then to add to that, Airbnb is basically along the same lines as well, where anybody can rent out their space, and then you can easily rent somebody else's space for a more cost efficient way than getting like a hotel room, for example.
Definitely excellent examples. So from what you've been telling your feedback, I can tell most of you have a really good idea of what a disruptive product is. I'll just give a small definition for anybody that's wondering. It really is something that creates an interruption in the market, right? Sometimes it either can create a more affordable product, a more convenient, or a simpler product. And this is something that is different and is innovative and creates value to the customer. So it creates a product that nobody else has done, but can, in the future, nobody can live without. So for example, Netflix. Netflix is a really good example as well. And Netflix at the beginning started emphasizing just on people that wanted the convenience of not having to go into a store, right? They didn't care if they had the latest releases or not. So Netflix, what they did was they took DVDs to people's houses, sorry. And then they started with the streaming process. Blockbuster was offered Netflix, and after a while, they said no, And after a while, Netflix clearly outdid Blockbuster, and Blockbuster is no longer in the market. So what is creating a disruptive product? It's doing the impossible. I got inspired a lot by this Walt Disney quote. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. So when it comes to creating buckets of feature prioritization, we can put them in 3 categories: the metric movers, the customer requests, and what's going to delight our end user. The metric movers are things that are involving our core product. It's either improving engagement, growth, revenue, improving UX. These are the things that pay the bills. These are what the product is and the core of the product. The customer requests are the things and the pain points customers are currently experiencing when using your products, and just a small fix could help them actually use your product in a better way. And then delight. Delight are not really one feature, but something that's going to make a difference in somebody's life. So something from your product that's going to inspire passion and loyalty. Is there one feature when we can find all 3? No. The metric movers are rarely requested or delightful. The customer requests rarely move metrics or delight people. And delightful features rarely move metrics, and by definition are not requested. I'm going to give you an example, a real world example of how this doesn't really work. When we were doing user research, when we did the platform that I mentioned before, all our customers were saying that they wanted an e-commerce store. They wanted a way to provide their products to customers in an easy and digital way. So we thought, you know what, this is going to be a metrics mover. It's going to bring revenue. This is something that the customers are requesting, and this is going to be so delightful because it's something new and something that's not in the Guatemalan market. We went, put all our efforts in, left all the other 3, and then we launched it. You know what happened? Nothing. People didn't really want to put their products online. They were really confused on how the whole logistics thing was gonna happen. So it really wasn't the success that we thought it was gonna be. And then we had to come back and rethink what we were doing with the product and go back and use all these 3 buckets of making different features. And that's how we help move the product forward. So what do you want to do? You want your product to become the unicorn. Great products combine all 3 features, but not all features, not every feature. No, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So great products combine all 3, but you can't find that in one feature. So how do you do this? You bring the heat. You boost engagement, prioritization, and human interaction. So once you boost engagement, you lower friction. This is something where you start improving UX, UI, and things like aha moments where your customers see value in your product. So for example, in the onboarding process, let's say what you want is your customer to continue to be engaged with your product. So you give them, if you give them an amazing onboarding experience, they will continue to use your product because they will have found aha moments where they feel like they're getting value. Prioritize. Focus on the first thing before you dive into the second. Evidence-based, data-driven, and empirical data should be some of the things that help you prioritize. And human interaction. Create exceptional experience by capturing the real nuisance of human interaction. So let's not forget that behind every product, there's a human. I can give another example of how we failed forward with the platform. We thought it was very easy and we were only focusing on providing a digital product to our end user. So we thought like everything's gonna be online, it's gonna be fine. People are going to figure out how to fill. It's like a normal form, kind of like a Google form. They can go in and just do it. Once we launched the platform, we realized people did not know how to fill the form because one of the questions was, describe your business. And most of these entrepreneurs did not know how to describe their business. So this is when we had to actually come back, think, and we needed to understand that what they needed was a mentorship. Not really just the platform, but they needed a mentorship. And that's how we started to rephrase or to see the product in a different way. But we needed to make sure that we kept that human interaction. That brought a lot more value and a lot more customers. So what is something that you can use to really bring value? Let's talk about emotions. Emotions are what drive actions. 50% of all purchases are done off emotions. A really good example is what's happening right now. One of the emotions that we're going through is fear, uncertainty, and we can see it at how once you go to either Trader Joe's or Safeway, there's nothing. All these memes where, oh, there's no toilet paper. This is because consumers are being driven by emotions. So either it be it positive or negatives, emotions do drive action. So I do really want to show you an example of an advertisement that does provoke emotion. This is not like a disruptive product. It was in its moment. But I just wanted to share it with you just so you can see a little bit of what I think is a more thought-provoking advertisement. And it could happen. We'd already said it was a possibility, but it's a...
Yeah, so you can just stop it and describe it.
Yeah, I will describe it. So basically this is an advertisement from HP, which is very emotional when it connects to when we lose a loved one. So HP basically was seeing all their sales go down on the printing end. So what they did is create this amazing advertising campaign where they started evoking emotions. And it is the father showing the son talking about the grandfather. And at first you can see him, and then you realize that it's not him, it's a picture. So once you can see it, it's a very good example of how you can provoke emotion. So another example is I did work for Disney a while back ago, and they said to always remember the magical moments. What is a magical moment for them? It was going into the park and being completely immersed in this beautiful, wonderful, made-up world, right? And one of the most important things to them was the customer. So you were able to create these magical moments by, if you saw a mom that was frustrated or a kid that was crying, you could always go in and give them a free ice cream, for example. So once they got back home, they were not going to remember the fact that they were crying in the line and that it was hot and humid and everything was expensive. They were going to remember maybe that moment and where they were frustrated and somebody just came in and gave them an ice cream. And that's something that they're going to tell other people, and it's going to drive those sales. Another thing to keep in mind when creating a disruptive product is to keep it simple, right? So simple really is hard. There's a quote that I really like from the DocuSign product director. It says, any dumb fool can make something complex. It takes a genius to make something simple. Because, why? Because simple is hard. Sometimes you think the most complex things are going to bring customers in. Usually they don't. Usually it's 1, 2, 3. You need to focus on one thing. Sometimes you start so many things that you don't finish one. And you need to ask yourself, prioritizing, what is the one thing that your users want to do? What are they hiring you to do? And remember always, mobile first. The product right now is in the palm of the hands of the customer, right? So it's something that you need to take into account when creating a really disruptive product. Another thing that a lot of companies don't take into account is their non-users. Software teams usually focus on their users, and they spend increasing time on people who they don't spend their time on people that don't use their products, right? So growth comes from your non-users, because you have more non-users than users. So what happens is sometimes you get so engrossed in the people that are already in your platform. You do understand the 80-20 rule, and you do know that the user that you do have to that you want to like decrease churn. But sometimes to create these delighting features, you need to talk to somebody that's not a user to understand why they're not a user and how you can actually get them into a platform and start using your product. Always think backwards from the future. So sometimes we tend to start thinking of one feature and then moving forward without actually seeing the bigger picture. So one of the good exercises to do is visualize success in 5 years. What does success look like for your product? And then just think about what features are going to make that product a success. And if a feature, a specific one you're already talking about, is there when you look back, then it's not a question of if you want to do it, it's a question of when. Common product questions are usually, should we build this? When should we build this? How should we build this? We get very distracted by things and asking should. If we have that visualization from the future, it will not be a question of should. We need to switch it to when. Every team, software is a team sport. Every function has a superpower when it comes to decisions. Why did I put the Avengers there? So, do you think only one Avenger could have defeated Thanos? I don't think so. They had to come together and become a team and understand where the strengths were in order to save the world. So it's the same thing with your product. Each one of these elements brings in a value. Product gives you the power to frame the discussion with strategy. Design, the power of visualization of possible choices. And engineering, the power to show what is possible. Sometimes we're big dreamers, and then engineering tells us, well, yes, it's possible. You just need to think about it in a different way. So it is a team sport, and creating great disruptive products, we need to take into account each one of these elements. And I would just like to leave you with some final thoughts. Something that you learn is that products are never done. I put the example here of a graduation because products are like your life. Once you finish school, you think, yes, I finished school. Okay, but then you realize that maybe you need to go to university. And then things start to pivot, right? Your life changes. You move from one state to another, or you find a partner. Things change, things pivot, just like your products do. So your product's never done. You're constructing on that. Behavior and value. Focus on what matters. So sometimes there are things or features that you know are going to drive revenue but are not aligned with your values or your company values. So that's something to keep in mind, because you will lose more people or more consumers by going against what your company's values are than what you will gain using this new feature, right? And love to learn. Something Pat said that really resonated with me in one of the classes was fail forward. So we're always learning, and our customers are always changing. So it's important to keep that in mind when creating a product. And here with the Agile team, I'm pretty sure that they help facilitate that a lot more. So that's it. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
I did see something pop in from Dave.
Uh-huh.
And Dave was asking, why are delight features not requested by customers?
Usually it's not that they're not directly requested by customers, but you need to look at the overall picture. Usually customers will ask for a specific feature and think more narrow. Maybe you will have one customer that comes up with like this amazing changing idea that you need to come back and then evaluate. But usually something that's going to be delightful or delight is something that you do see from a higher level and see how to bring down. Don't know if it makes any sense. I don't know if that answered your question. I can't see the chat for some reason.
Dave, did you want to go off mute and answer that? Did that answer your question? He says answered.
Perfect.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sophia, you can stop the share screen so I can see the people faces. And
there was one more question from Christian.
Yeah, I'll go for it. Great
for it.
presentation, Sophia. Question for you. I thought it was really interesting. You brought up that focusing just on the users could be a pitfall in the development of your product. I was wondering if you had any other kind of ideas for other pitfalls to kind of be aware of.
There's lots sometimes. So going forward, like I said, with that delight features, listen to your customer, but don't take it as the word. Make sure to always go back and look at the metrics and look at the analytics and see if it's something that's actually gonna drive revenue before you start sinking your teeth into it. Make sure that you prioritize. Prioritization is one of the most important things. Sometimes you bring out things that are not that significant for the end user, but you need to make sure that you understand your user completely and what their actual pain points before going in and coming up with the next big crazy idea that you think is going to move things forward. So yeah, it's just more customer focused.
Thanks.
anyone else? Questions for Sophia before we open for Pat to continue? All right, Pat, the screen is yours.
Thank you. And can everybody see my screen okay? Awesome. Thank you very much, Sophia. I'll amplify a lot of the great insights you shared. And most of you know me, but I've had the good fortune of spending most of my career at Disney, the Walt Disney Company, in pictures and television, starting off in criminal intelligence, spending a lifetime in entertainment, and now my own company. Usually spend time all around the world, but I'll be home for a while. And get right down to my favorite playbook in the area of agile product management mindset, and go right to the hardest part. And that is agility. And being an effective agile product manager requires us to start with our mindset, challenging our beliefs and really believing in our full potential to tackle the unknown unknowns and really create a product that's going to be disruptive and differentiating. If we don't believe it, we're not going to be able to achieve. If we do, then the sky's the limit. Appreciations to Joshua Kirievsky for sharing with us the synthesis of all the agile values down into modern agile. Make people awesome, deliver value continuously, make safety a prerequisite, Safety is so vital to our beliefs, our growth mindset, that it's been called out as a core value in modern Agile, and experiment and learn rapidly. So what I've pulled together for the rest of our time talk tonight, and I encourage this to be highly interactive, is how we ground our beliefs and core values with some core principles and capabilities. Most of these Sophia's already introduced us to, but I'll amplify: customer first, start now, learn by doing, experiences matter. The emotion that Sophia was talking about, create the experiences which really anchor our product and create that delight. Make value visible, simplify, do less, innovate continuously, adapt. To Kamal's earlier question, it's all about adapting to the changing priorities. All of us are fortunate to be experiencing the disruption in the world around us right now, because it calls that home. As Kamal shared earlier, you might have put a lot of effort into developing a quarterly plan, or even the next horizon, only to find out that everything is disruptive when the customer's needs change radically, as well as the employees. Discover new ways of working, NWOW, new ways of leading, and new ways of learning. And finally, lead through experimentation. Some of the tips and tools that really help us to create that disruptive product is to validate our assumptions through thin slice experiments. Even we believe if we know something to be true, it's vital these days, because of the dynamics and the changing priorities of all of our customers, to validate our assumptions through thin slice experiments. Learn that you're on target, or pivot quickly to reduce the waste, to create an environment where we're going to be creating disruptive products. And then reinforced through specific behaviors. Clarity of purpose is key. Having a compelling and inspiring vision, clarity of outcomes, or learning through real empirical data. One thing we know to be true, that agility itself is empirical. Our learning needs to be informed with facts and empirical data. Otherwise, we're just going to validate our own biases and our own mental models. Develop a value model, an empirical value model that's transparent to everyone in the team, everyone in the organization, in terms of what our strategic top priorities are, and build that value model into a prioritization metrics, or a scorecard, if you will, to help us prioritize. Sophia mentioned that software development was a team sport. Product management is a team sport as well. Gone are the days when we're expected. We are the champions of value as product managers, but gone are the days when we actually do it alone. We need to get strong voice of customer and the entire team involved to help us really with those identify those priorities. Collaboration, communication, understand the need to really discover the customer needs and not presume that we might know that. Kick off the whole project or product lifecycle. I'm going to quickly get into the question about how do we look at products differently than projects? But kicking off every new initiative with an inception followed by discovery in terms of validating our ideas. One of the key things we need to remember now is that roadmaps are not like traditional project plans, but roadmaps need to be adaptive continuously. Story mapping is a valuable practice, and customer journey mapping. Deeply understand the customer and understand what's going to delight them, in addition to design thinking and energizing the team. So one of my favorite tools is this comes to us from BayALN, and it's been promoted through Harvard Business Review as well, to really zero in on what customers really need. The highest value that you want to look at in terms of your product lifecycle would be something that could be self-transcendent. for the customers. Life-changing, emotionally charged, and functionally value added. So these characteristics, this is a powerful reminder of things that are going to delight. The higher up they are in this pyramid, the more likely they are to really delight the customer. So I'm going to go back to basics now and focus on the radical customer value focus tools. We all understand and use empathy maps continuously, but empathy is one of our core capabilities that's really going to differentiate us in terms of that disruptive product. Deep awareness of who the customers are and what they really need. By paying attention, getting out of the office and paying attention to what are they saying, what are they feeling, what are they doing, what are they hearing. Another favorite tool, the value proposition canvas, enables us to isolate what are the features or what are the characteristics of our product that we want to deliver based on what's going to differentiate or disrupt the market in terms of those prioritizations that we saw from the Bain chart.
Pat, I
yes.
apologize for interrupting, but Dale had a question about, could you define self-transcendence?
Thank you, Dale,
Yep,
and
thank
thank you for interrupting, Lisa. So I'm going to go back a bit, if you don't mind, to that chart. Self-transcendence is really being able to get beyond our those voices in our head that are saying, I want, I want, I want, and really elevating our life to around a compelling sense of purpose. So if we could tap into an individual self-actualization, if you will, and self-transcendence to get beyond, I believe many individuals might be experiencing that in the chaos that we're experiencing today. Get beyond, we start to actually re-level our priorities based on what's really, really important. Give our lives a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. Is that good enough, Dave and Lisa? Or should we go a little deeper into that?
Would you have an example?
Yeah, you know, anyone who's on a path towards enlightenment. I'm actually writing a book right now, and I don't say that, I say that quite respectfully, Volker. I'm writing a book right now on the neuroscience of adaptive leadership. And we're unpacking a lot of what self-transcendence would do, would be accelerating our path towards what Zen Buddhist individuals would perceive to be their path to enlightenment, if you will. That would be the ultimate, but a greater sense of purpose, giving your life a greater sense of meaning beyond. If you look just below self-transcendence, you're seeing the next level down for prioritization for product features or services would be providing hope in times of extreme change like now, enabling an individual to self-actualize, to really reach their full potential. Motivators, leaving a legacy. Leaving a legacy kind of connects the bridge between life-changing and transcendent, right? Where individuals are more motivated to truly leave a legacy, then that would be bridging up to the self-transcendence. Does that make sense?
Do we have an example of a product that drives self-transcendence? I'm still struggling with that.
I mean, one of the things that came to mind for me, for example, as I'm listening, is there were times when Airbnb hit that for me.
Yeah.
There was something about social sharing and kind of being welcoming and opening my home to strangers, doing something that, you know, as Sophia said earlier, we were taught not to do. And suddenly that became acceptable. It was sort of, you know, made easy for me and created sort of a win-win situation, at least initially. I think by now, that sort of community orientation has sort of suffered in the scaling, but I mean, that's what comes to my mind. Maybe there are other examples, because it's the example that makes it
Makes it click, yes. Something that would touch you at a deeper level, you know, and really make an impression. I can think of examples of services I've offered to some clients, but from a product point of view, it would really be something you can't, once you've attained it, you can't live without it. You know, some of the tools that are out there that are, I think, going to emerge in this time of extreme change and the angst that people are going to is some mind tools, mindfulness tools, meditational kinds of tools, might be go beyond just wellness and emotional tools, but actually help people kind of connect to a sense of purpose, find their purpose and connect to that sense of purpose, would be in that peak of what customers really want. They're probably not going to be asking you for it. A topic that we were sharing when Sophia was sharing her insights is examples here would be something that touches you at such a deep level that once you have it, you can't imagine going back to life as before. And your example about Airbnb, different people are touched by different things, but that selflessness that gets people out of their own sort of egocentric me, in terms of we, would be in that category of self-transcendence. Does anyone else on in the community tonight have an example of a service or a product that you could envision would enable people to transcend to a higher sense of purpose or a higher sense of self?
Ron has one. I just saw him raise his hand.
I had the sense from my very first personal computer. It was before they were called personal computers. It was a microcomputer, and it tied into my nerd neurons in ways
Yes.
that I had not expected, and it was probably self-transcendent. Thanks, Volker, and Pat for helping helping to see that.
And thank you, Ron, because the fact that you remembered it, you know, you connected back to that moment where your life changed, right?
Yeah.
Your life was changed by that computer and that experience. It was transcendent, right? So thank you for sharing that. It's an elusive characteristic because it's different for everyone. But as a product, if you were developing a scorecard and you could nail that self-transcendence, some might believe that the iPhone might fall into that category, or for those of us who first experienced the beauty and transcendence of an iPod, where we could carry our own favorite music with us wherever we go. For me, that would have been equally as transcendent as a personal computer.
I have another example. This one's, Khan Academy. I don't know if you've heard about it before, but people learning really complex subjects in any part of the world using YouTube videos is amazing as a starting point. And then he developed it into an app and a whole curriculum where schools now actually use it as part of their daily life. So it's a huge social impact and self-transcendence.
That's a great one too, Kamal. And many of us might even find Google to be somewhat transcendent to the point that, information at our fingertips where we can find anything we want. We can't imagine life without it. Let's put it that way. Any other stories that anyone would like to share?
Yeah, this is Gail. I think Siri is an example of that too, where you speak all the voice recognition. People get so hooked on that, and I know a lot of the different accents and things like that with the voice recognitions in the cars and all of that. People are just super hooked, and once they start speaking and able to interact that way, they can't go back, right, to any other way of interacting with a computer.
Yeah,
GPS.
That's a great one too. Those
GPS is also pretty central to our lives right now.
Yeah.
We had one as well. Do you want to chat with them?
Sure. I think one of the ones that you're targeting, Pat, is like micro lending. The idea that I can go and loan out like $10,000-$20,000 to a bunch of, I can make a little bit of money, but say I micro lend it out to rural farmers in Africa. That's a case of where I'm transcending myself. I'm providing hope. I'm actualizing myself. I'm making a little money on top of that. But there's more purpose there than there is profit.
Yeah, that's a great example. And Kamal, you may remember some of the work that you did at Holt, where the students were actually they're out to change the world in similar, really making a difference. So that was great, Hugh. Thank you very much. And any other discussion on this? Thank you for that sharing.
Alfonso or Kamal, do you guys have anything that you wanted to add? Because I saw that you mentioned stuff in the chat as well.
I covered mine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay.
Cool. So it does all start with our beliefs and our mindset, the growth mindset, but empathy is so key. We're seeing this in day-to-day experiences as we're all dealing with the VUCA, the volatility and the uncertainty. I think we're all finding empathy here, that we're amplifying our empathy, and that's key for us as product managers. The value proposition canvas, there's some trigger questions here. We won't go over them in detail, but you'll have access to this slideshow that allow us to understand that questions are a powerful tool for us as product managers. We shouldn't expect to have all the answers, but the questions are key. And listening, deep listening, active listening to those on our team and our customer focus groups and going out and experiencing it make all the difference. So the simplicity of the customer value proposition makes it one of the most powerful tools in our toolkit. Some customer jobs triggers here are things that we might be thinking about and asking to discover those transcendent or life-changing features that could really differentiate our product from any other product in the market in terms of really creating the highest value to delight the customers. Customer pain triggers here as well. Being able to really deeply empathize and understand the pains the customer's feeling, knowing that that's going to be a disruptive or differentiating opportunity for us, and then customer gains. Just as Sophia was sharing that unicorn, if we could address both gains, pains, and real customer needs, our product is likely to be creating that delight or differentiation. So for each of those customers' needs, identify those differentiating or disruptive gain creators, pain relievers, and solutions to their jobs to be done. So we all know this. I'm reinforcing it through the lens of a power tool that will really help us to zero right in. Less is best. You might remember back from one of those earlier principles, the desire that we have sometimes as product managers to generate stories and to create more is better. The belief that we might have that more is better in terms of we want to create the perfect product, truly less is best. Customers need less. If we could nail what they need with the fewest possible features, outcome-based focus rather than outputs, then we're going to win in terms of the disruptive product marketplace. So discussion now, maybe some time to, I'll jump right into some of the topics that we brought up today, the project to product, the adaptive leadership mindset and how that fits. But let's hear from everyone in the group to see if there's something that you would like to share, a story now, or questions.
I'm not
Cesar,
quite
you
clear,
good?
Pat, what
Yes,
stories you're inviting us to. What kind of stories you're inviting?
Oh, anything that might have sparked your something that you want to share. So my intention of using the word story here is really what's coming to mind that you would like to share with the group, or to steer this conversation to a particular question that you might have. Stories or questions, Volker.
Got it. Thanks.
I can always come up with stories, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to share.
One of the things, Pat, while you were going through this, that I saw a lot of energy that when people were connecting to the products, you know,
Yeah.
and Kamal had mentioned Headspace, which was the one that came to top of my mind, simply because I've been using it as an individual, but I noticed, I guess in the last 6 months or so, they've been doing like group meditations. And just like being able to connect with other people, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, and I don't even get to talk to these people, I don't even know who these people are, but just the fact that we're in it together, really like it makes me so happy, you know. So that's, I don't know, when we started talking about examples, that really clicked for me. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. That's a great story. That's what I was looking for in terms of that, the stories, the connectors, because that, if it connected with you, it's likely to connect to a product that you might be considering for the greater community. You know, so that's part of our empathy, is to really pay attention at a deeper level of what releases energy for people. Anyone else?
I just want to add to what Lisa said, you know, especially that feature that they included in the Headspace app for the group meditation. It's so simple, and it just uplifts the energy even more quickly than when you're just meditating by yourself, right? Or even when you keep it on and everybody else is meditating and you're still doing some other stuff, it still helps. So, you know, I completely agree with that. It's got some definite magic to it as a product.
Thank you, Kamal. And that is what we're looking for as product owners, right? Getting outside our own head and watching our customers interact with a product or a scenario, and finding the magic. So that's a great way that you guys kind of highlighted the fact it's all about releasing the magic. Having spent most of my career at Disney, Disney gets magic. And they get magic because they pay attention to what's magical for the customers. Not that they presume to know, but that deep awareness that, Lisa, you were talking about, that empathy, where you could see in the group, the audience here, what released their energy. That's what we're looking for. And reinforcing less is best. We want that magical energy, and we don't want more of it. We want to actually peel away anything that's actually distracting us from that differentiating or that disruptive energy, to hone in on the magic, to find the magic, to find the signal beneath the noise, to find the dance beneath the words, the poem. Cool. Other thoughts, other discussion topics?
Dave, you want to jump in? I see it in the chat.
Dave was having problems with his microphone.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a question of like how distinct is the differentiation between gains, pains, and jobs, because there's a lot of overlap, and you know, sometimes taking care of a pain kind of counts like a gain, and there's a bit of the question of like, are these super distinct, or is it just a way to help us discover something unexpected?
Yeah, it's not, we don't have to be too rigid about, especially if we get confused, was that a gain or was that the spirit there is to look holistically at the customer's experience. If you look at different copies of the customer value proposition, you'll see different languages, you'll see jobs to be done. And that's another way of framing up the fact that the spirit here is pay attention to the whole person, the customer experience. What is it that they're pay attention, as Lisa was saying, even paying attention to their facial expressions, to what releases their energy. Sometimes if it removes pain, it's a higher priority than if it addresses a waste, you know, or a job to be done. But the spirit here is the reason why I included those questions that you might want to think through. Again, the questions aren't intended to be checklists, go through each one, but they're intended to really pay attention to what the customer needs. If you can read their energy levels and really start to go deep, learning from them, learning from the experience as it emerges, then you will develop your own customer value proposition unique to your particular product or service that you're considering.
It also reminded me of how Steve Jobs was saying that the customer never really know what he wants. He just knows that the small problem that is in front of him and he wants to solve.
Yes.
And it's a job of the good product manager, as Sophia was saying, back from the future, have a good vision, how the success looks like in the 5 years, and go beyond the immediate pains and immediate gains, see the big picture. That's what it reminded me of.
Yeah, great insight, Selena, because if we ask a customer, what do they need, or even what do they want, their mental models block them from actually even imagining. Let's say going back to Steve Jobs, right? He wouldn't have been able to create something that had never been created before. As Sophia said, when we're looking for being a disruptive product manager, we're trying to create the impossible. And people wouldn't even think about that. Disney, there are some people, Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, you know, who really, that's their space. You know, that they're S-curve jumping, they're continuously pressing the edge of the envelope for the impossible. But if we ask the customer, what do they want? They're, you know, the traditional Henry Ford story, they're just going to want a faster horse, not a car.
Pat, I had a question, if I may. In your experience of working with all these companies, like I think one of the things we often see is an anti-pattern, if you will, around the lack of customer testing and basic customer insight, all the way down from doing focus groups, trying to figure it out, trying to find out your audience, and really do like a lean startup approach, all the way down to like usability testing.
Right.
You know, can you tell us kind of like from your experience, like, is there any sort of, with the organizations you've been with, like, what's the success rate of those that actually go through it and do it properly and those that don't? Are there outliers, or, you know, anything in that, because of your depth of experience of working with other companies? You know, what's that been like out in the field, like success rates and that type of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll share my insights and invite everyone else to share theirs as well. It's like a razor's edge, quite honestly. It's the trap that we fall into is just enough user experience. So then we've got it. And then our mental models kick in and they blind us to, and I mean, not just the product managers, but the whole team, right? We think we got it. We go into solution mode. And then we get blinded to validating our assumptions. That's why I stress so importantly, leading through experimentation, right? Validating all of our assumptions. If we could put a little control in place, you know, we're really good at talking about definitions of done and definitions of ready. We need to actually factor real habits or real triggers that require us to validate our assumptions. I go so far as to advise my clients to change their whole funding models to fund only evidence-based funding, only evidence that has been validated through customer experience testing, A/B testing, you know, however you're going to validate it, but requiring us to think in thin slice experiments and validate our assumptions. It's such a powerful habit that we have to break away from or pull away from, that we almost need an equally strong force of habit that we fail forward into to require that teams get funded for running the thinnest possible slice experiment and then come back for more funding when they've got evidence to validate the fact that we're probably onto something pretty good here. We want to reward them for we want to make it very liberal for them to fund the experiments. We don't want to suppress that innovation, but we don't want to, the whole sunk cost bias. There's so many cognitive biases out there that blind us to what the customer is really saying or doing. Companies that do that very well, Facebook, Google, the traditional Apple, are doing it better than most. Retail, although some of the retail companies have really put in some discovery labs and some innovation labs, they usually fall into the trap of just getting distracted by the innovation lab itself and not incorporate it into the day-to-day funding or the lifeblood, if you will, of how a product, goes to market. But A/B testing, most companies that are cognizant of the importance of that are paying attention and truly exercising, using that. My better companies really go to evidence-based funding. So they do not fund anything blanket, for the, life of a 1 or 2 or 3 year project, but they really do rolling wave evidence-based funding, which is a really good habit to influence the behavior that we want to. And the behavior here is really paying attention to the customers. As we all know from being just on this call tonight rather than in person with what we're all experiencing, customers' needs change so fast that we have to continuously revalidate our assumptions, and deliver the most minimum viable everything to get it out onto the market or into an A/B test scenario so that we can continue to validate our assumptions. Would anyone like to add to that or share a different opinion?
Yeah, this is Gail. I would like to talk about the sort of the phenomenon of how sub-brands develop from a brand. I actually did research on it, and for example, with the iPhone and all that, all these other sub-brands sort of developed under that. And so, and even with insurance and things like that, I mean, really in any market, finance and all of that. So the book of business is taken, right? You've got this whole group that's, sort of personifies the experience, for example, with the iPhone. And then you can sort of start up other brands based on that brand. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Gail. And that brings us to a tool that I didn't include in our toolkit tonight, and that would be the business model canvas. So
okay, thank you.
What we're really looking for are those disruptive accelerators, if you will, that enable us to actually reinvent either the brand of the company or spin off a whole new brand. One that I'll bring up that's quite prominent that everyone on the call will recognize is Disney Plus. And I don't know if many of you know that with the disruption that we're going through right now, the Disney CEO stepped down a year earlier than he was planning to. And the successor who was groomed for that role was those innovative, really bright, genius level leaders from Disney Plus. But instead, they're bringing in the successor now to the CEO for Disney is a guy from the parks. So it's an interesting thing to build lifeblood back into a brand. Disney's got a number of different kind of brand areas, Disney Plus being one. The Mandalorian has kind of taken everybody by storm. But what we're looking for in terms of that disruptive product is truly reinventing ourselves. I did some work about a year or so ago in Dubai with Mitsui Company, and they were their core brand was, they're a conglomerate, but their core brand was oil and energy, and they reinvented themselves around extending their brand to healthcare, because they saw that as an emerging opportunity that totally disrupted their brand, but didn't destroy the other brands. They wouldn't cannibalize the other core brand recognition, but they're looking for that new branch, if you will, or that new opportunity to step into. We're seeing that, we're looking for that in terms of a disruptive product. What has never been invented before that we could step into without betting the whole company on it that could bring down the company? Disney does that particularly well. Other thoughts on that, or would anyone else like to add to that?
Lisa, maybe you can pull a few more questions from chat. I see people were typing something.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that have come in. I'm just taking it from the top, guys. Alfonso had a question about products attempting to introduce disruptive ideas but fail to achieve mainstream acceptance. As an example, virtual reality.
Perfect. That's a great one, Alfonso. The spirit behind how I would address that is test and learn, test and learn, test and learn, right? To achieve that mainstream, you really want to set your outcome goals early. And if they don't, and in thin slice experiments, and if you don't really nail what it is you intended to achieve, if you have that objective quantified there, your OKR or your KPIs, and say, for us to be successful, start with that preposition. You know, for us to be successful, we need to achieve this share of the marketplace. If we get too enthused about some tenuous kind of activity in the market and think, wow, more is better, and we forget the less is best, and we don't pivot, we have to be quite disciplined in terms of pivoting and have those learning curves, those learning feedback loops. I always go for 3-way learning loops as a part of my toolkit as a leader or a product leader, and that would be, are we getting better and better? Are we hitting our objectives? So that's the first, I was addressing that. What was your clear-cut objective? Did we hit it or miss it? Second question, are we getting continuously better and better, which shows that we're learning? Third question, are we still doing the right thing? Because the disruptive market that we're in these days, this is an area that Elon Musk is particularly powerful at. It's called S-curve jumping. If we forget to ask that third question, we get distracted by, yeah, we're looking good, the market, you know, we're hitting our financial goals, our cash flow. But if we're not always looking at the farther horizon to say, are we still doing the right thing or are we missing something? We want to incorporate that third feedback loop in place to be asking each of those types of questions. Is that good enough for now, Alfonso?
I mean, what comes to me here too is how much of it is timing.
Yeah.
Where, like, Steve Jobs knew to push the iPhone before releasing the iPad, even though the idea for the iPad apparently already was on the shelf for several years. And he had just the intuition to have to wait as not to tank a product or a product idea. And so I think virtual reality, it's a little too soon to tell. So far, virtual reality required like these super strong computers and cables and setups and yeah, now that Facebook has this thing that doesn't require any of that complex setup, virtual reality is going to change really fast. I don't think we've seen it yet. So there's sort of And well, you know, I think there's a little bit of that innovation curve where there's a long, slow ascent in the beginning before it starts to S-curve up.
Yeah, great observation, Volker. There's multiple dimensions at play. One is the technology feasible and lightweight enough now for us to run experiments. Look at the Google glasses, right? You know, an idea before its time, right? Everybody was like, couldn't wait, and then it's like, no market, no applications either, right? So it's a complex. It kind of goes to Kamal's question earlier about complex adaptive leadership and complex adaptive product management. We're now entering into a world paradigm where we've got to be looking at all the forces at play. You know, the how do we use virtual reality? Sophia can tell you that in the Berkeley class that we just wrapped up, we had a number of architects in that class, that product class, Agile product class, and they came up with a brilliant class project on integrating virtual reality and simulation in the building business, even to the point of smart bricks. You know, so they were thinking at it from a very specific application, and they came up with some compelling research on how it could have prevented a lot of architectural disasters. But I think we're still grappling with the real best fit for virtual reality. So that does take on a whole new dimension in terms of constantly learning. We're in a learning mode still with that as the technology is maturing. And the applications, right?
There were 3 other questions we've got queued up here, and one's from Christian. It's, could you discuss tips for triaging the product priorities coming from customer jobs, customer pains, and customer gains?
Yeah, one of my favorite questions. A balancing act there and a differentiator. There is a tool from a tip perspective that you might want to incorporate into your toolkit, and that is trade-off sliders. And you'll see it's in the deck down about 10 slides into the handouts. So if you determine right up front for your product strategy, what's going to be more important, and use something as simple as, you know, a pain, a gain, or a differentiator, but really kind of try to come up with a scorecard or develop a prioritization model that uses empirical data and the wisdom of the group. Some of the things I always am surprised with Agile product teams is we're really good at estimating effort with our story points or our, you know, planning poker or whatever, buy a feature game. But somehow we don't apply that same discipline to prioritization around how we would score this pain against that gain, right? And really put some customer focus groups, asking the customer, what's more important to you, this or that? And then say, is it 5 times more important? And kind of try to discover, if you will, a way to prioritize and use your prioritization tool quite meticulously in terms of then running that thin slice experiment to get something out into the product, onto the website, to see in reality if customers really buy it. If we take a lesson from Lean Startup, for example, we could use our websites much more effectively by just putting a teaser out there and saying, upcoming attraction, you know, we're adding this feature. Do you want to be first to buy it? Do you want to test it and see if 50,000 users see that message, how many actually respond? Things like that could help augment with real data from customer experiences to make those trade-offs between which of the features do we really want to prioritize. That's what I meant earlier when I said it's no longer the purview of just the product manager to know that. It's not some infinite wisdom or crystal ball that we have, but we use all the empirical data forces at our disposal to validate our assumptions with real customer data, real customer focus groups, A/B tests, or going out and observing customers using a pilot product that's out there. Is that good enough for now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Another one we got comes from Ron. And Ron's question is, how does the product management playbook differ between disruptive products and other kinds of products?
So I think a product manager playbook is useful for all products. But what's different about the disruptive bits of it is it really going to disrupt the market? Is it going to create something totally new? So it's not the playbook itself, but it's the, what is it your target outcome is going to be? Are you looking for pure disruption? Then you're going to focus more on the innovative, stretch the edge elements in the product toolkit. If you're going for disruption, you're also going to focus more on reducing the cost of value and achieving, letting go radically of the waste that's in the product development process, but actually getting to that true disruptiveness. You need to almost be self-funding that to test and learn continuously. Does that make sense?
Self-fund. So the self-fund part was where you lost me.
Okay, Ron. If we look at the product life cycle and we look at what the effort or the cost is on a more traditional product life cycle, we're going to need to radically simplify that to get something out into the hands of the customers much faster than a traditional product life cycle. I'll use an example now that many of us are watching closely. We know the current effort that's involved in clinical trials, and with the novel virus that we're all facing, we know agencies around the world are radically looking to reduce that life cycle of the clinical trials testing to get something, the needs of the world supersede the rigor that's involved in clinical trials, if that makes sense to people, just as a metaphor. Streamlining, getting something into the hands of the customers so that you can experience more rapid learning. Shortening the learning loops would be another way to say it, Ron. And in the shortening of it, we're reducing the cost of value so that we can self-fund more learning, because the learning loops are shorter and cheaper. We're reducing the cost and the time to value. Does that make sense?
What I'm translating here too is accepting a completely different level of risk.
Yeah.
I would also add fail fast. So you're not waiting for a longer period. So.
Right. And sometimes you're concurrently, well, you're reducing all the waste from the cycle for sure. And sometimes you're running concurrent cycles to accelerate it based on the urgency of the disruption, right? Because when you're seeking disruption, you're looking at all those edge opportunities to create that disruptive product.
That also reminds me about David Bland testing business ideas. Remember, whoever was attending his presentation at the end of the last year, he put the prioritization matrix, impact, and how much do we know about it?
Yes, confidence level.
Yeah.
Right. Because, and you sometimes the risk as well, Elena. So when you're building your prioritization models, you quantify the value, which you score, and then you look at, you use as the cost is the, you take the value divided by the cost to come up with a value index, and then you add weighting factors of confidence and potential risk or other outliers that factor into your prioritization.
Yep. Great. Well, I just want to check a time a little bit. It's 8:19, almost 8:20. And I want to check with you, Pat, as a speaker. Do you want to go over the rest of the slide deck, or you want to start breakout room, or you're happy to continue with questions?
I'm happy to do whatever the group, I'm here for the group. So it's more important for me to get feedback from them. I can kind of quickly buzz through the slides so you see a sense of what's out there. But but these are all takeaways that you can have as you're kind of walking away. Vision boxes and tools. This one tool everyone might find this powerful if you haven't already discovered Dr. BJ Fogg's formula to prioritize. It's worth checking out in terms of helping us to have a real edge on identifying the factors of creating new customer behavior that kind of tie back to that pyramid that we showed earlier. Include basically the customer's motivation, as well as the different factors of that and how you might manage this. He's got a lot of good videos that go deeper into this, but I think it's a powerful tool that you might want to include in your toolkit if you haven't discovered it already. And everybody knows minimum viable product. The Osborne method's pretty good too. And here's the trade-off sliders I was talking about earlier with the one question about how do we know if you set the trade-off sliders early, then you'll know clearly if you have to make a decision, you've already defined, what your priorities are in terms of the most negotiable to the least negotiable. So I use this one quite frequently in my business. And that's just it for the slides. I've got a wealth of additional material. If in the conversation people are interested in some more of that, I can make sure I send that to you, Elena, and you get it out to the team. But maybe we should take a quick show of hands or vote from the group. Do we want to move into workout groups? Do we want to, I've got some thought-provoking questions that might trigger kind of deeper communication, or what do you guys want to do? It's your meetup.
Pat, there was just one last question that somebody had posted online, so I definitely wanted to get to that one for the group and then after that. And this is from Suresh, and the question is, how do you counter a company with a poor or no product making a lot of noise based on recent funding?
Let me think about if I even understand that question. How do you counter a company that has a product making a lot of noise about recent funding challenges?
Maybe Suresh, you can jump in and give an example.
Yeah, so what I meant is, yeah, here I am, this is Suresh. So my question is, like, we have a competitor which got a lot of funding recently. They have almost no product. I said no product or very poor product. They're just making entry, but they're getting a lot of buzz based on the funding from a high profile investor.
Ah, okay.
And so they're getting into every customer, which they're getting priority, or they're getting funneled into like top 5 without, and we know for sure that they don't have any product at the moment which can give us any competition.
Okay. Well, that might be one that we'd want to open up for the group as well, but I'll just tell you how I might approach it and then invite everyone else to share as well. It's kind of a technique I use that's sort of show me the value. I think I would try and find some way to heighten the facts about that organization and question why they might be pulling work away from your organization that has a more, you might not be able to, and that doesn't mean tearing them down. That just means kind of asking insightful questions on help me understand, help me see the value, try and pull it apart, try and actually, but what you can do on your product market side is to really try to showcase your value to get reality out there into the marketplace, right? Because chances are we see this sometimes with customer behavior patterns of where I've seen it most, and what's hitting me with this question, Suresh, is aggressive marketing or aggressive PR on a product that's really not going to deliver the value that you know your product is. How do you counter that? By really getting customer testimonials about your product and getting the truth out there and showcasing what you have to offer to break the frenzy, if you will, of everybody flying to that other market because they've got the high profile press. Yeah, you might try and also get a higher profile spokesperson. But I think honestly, the real data and testimonials from your customers and showcasing your customers. There's when we were talking earlier about that hierarchy of priorities, now more than ever, you're going to see customers really interested in the truth and real testimonials from real people who they can look at. I'll tell you a really quick story, if everybody's okay with that. One of my clients is the DBS Bank in Singapore. They were at one time the worst performing bank in all of Asia. And they've quickly moved over a 2.5, 3 year period. They moved to become the best bank in the world. That's how they dealt with that scenario, right? They put all their focus on what do we need to do to really simplify the customer value proposition and clarify it by putting in a customer value model, by really focusing on building the leadership of their leadership team. And if any of you are interested in Googling this, what you're going to see, if you check out just the DBS Bank, DBS Bank in Singapore, you look at their website, you'll see that they do a brilliant job of showcasing the small players in terms of their customers and how they've used their bank loan that they got to change the world, kind of tapping into that hierarchy chart of really making a difference. And when you look and experience that bank's website, they're showcasing the case studies of people who are using their product and testimonials. They were able to counteract the example. It's what came to my mind, Suresh, with your story. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you so much, Preet. Thank you so much. It helps a little in terms of getting our own press, even though we are trying to push more of press in terms of highlighting all the good things that we have to offer against all our customers, or basically all our competitors, not customers.
Yes,
and,
exactly. Well, try to use social media as well. If you could create a buzz about you where your customers are talking about you, you know, where you showcase from a kind of a social media perspective what people are saying about you, that makes a lot of powerful difference because people pay attention to what others are saying about you rather than just showcasing, but also showcasing the differences you've made or your product has made in the lives of those customers who are using it. That's what DBS does so well. And if you do check out the bank's website, you'll be impressed with how they showcase their small investors or their small people who are taking out small, like the microloan stuff that we were talking about earlier, how it's changing the world, how they're changing the world, right? So it earned them the Best Bank in the World award, which is pretty cool. It's a highly coveted credential for banks.
Thank you so much for your insight, Preet.
You're very welcome.
Great.
And that finishes all of the questions that were online.
Great. And I'm thinking that it is 8:29 and it is as good as it can be for tonight. And I would probably, my inclination would be to skip the break rooms and then just take a little deep breath and process how our first experience went today.
Cool.
And because we might be doing more of this event in the future, we don't know when are we going to be out of the weeds with the coronavirus. So why don't we just take a deep breath, think about how did it go, and what can we do better in the future, or like what was surprising today, or what can be done better. That is our another opportunity of communal learning for the first of its kind event that we just had. And I just want to say that the slides would be shared, so don't worry about those. Just think about how did it go, Pat, and I would ask you to stop sharing so I can see everyone.
Oh, sure. And if you'd like, Elena, I just pulled up a retrospective matrix. That was the only reason I was still sharing. But if you'd like me to stop that, that's okay too. You don't need that, right?
Yeah, I think we can do without it.
Ah, okay, got it.
Thank you so much, Don.
Sure.
What do you think about, Elena, if we do breakout rooms of, I don't know, 3 or 4, and start in a smaller group, and then sort of gather the highlights of our conversations either in chat or, you know, then in the whole group?
Sounds good.